What's that?
What? No, nothing.
8:30 start time normally.
That's what it's supposed to be. Yeah.
By the way, can I ask you, I'm setting this up so, of course, it's at 8:30, but when you really start the meeting, I'm able to go back and
Edit
edit it.
it? Okay. I think, I'm gonna see if Bruce is in, and otherwise, if he's not, we're just gonna kick off. You know, I think, I'd like Bruce to be here from the start, but if he's not available, we'll go ahead and launch into it with those that are on the phone. I don't like keeping people waiting. You do need a donut.
No coffee, I get my own.
ERP approval? It's a huge one.
Oh, yeah.
Donuts, but no coffee.
Donuts and no coffee, isn't that terrible? Oh, hey, Phil, how long have you been living in St. Paul?
Yeah, no doubt.
A lot of work.
No doubt.
13 years now?
Well, I fell in love with it.
Started
Yeah.
It's like where I grew up in Brooklyn.
Wow.
And now we've got
Just
a
drove through it.
4 or 5 year project ahead of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
close enough to everything I wanna get to.
They say
but definitely
38.
far enough away from
You
everything.
guys are doing quite a lot of downtown as well.
Yeah.
Crossing on 150, I look down at this one. That's the old town.
Munis
Small town.
executive.
Yeah, so I live on the 150.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, so I get a little bit
It'll be nice.
far enough
if
away
you
from
go
where I can still see the
here
mountains
to
and kind of away from everything.
meeting that
Like,
we
yeah.
started
In
in
the-
Surrey,
Oh, yeah, in the old.
Yeah.
Well,
It's a more.
Nearer
Yeah.
the top,
Used to be
Agreed.
different.
they're,
So,
they
take
still
a
need
kid
to
and
create,
dogs walking
we're
back
doing the
there.
hosted version of the product,
Up that street.
but it's still the server
Just
based
seeing how far
on-premise
that valley
system.
goes.
Okay.
That's just
We've been doing
Okay.
Christmas
versus
and Labor Day.
a true cloud-based ERP system,
Many years.
You have a crystal?
like Oracle
Just
on Saturday
or
night.
Workday.
I think my favorite part about
Which
this
they
was when
Amazon
we shut down
built
some
for.
of Main Street, that's the drag. We
Their
shut
web
it down
servers.
and do a
They're not
cruise night.
just
People bring up their old cars.
Yeah.
client server desktop
It just
system.
reminds you of like,
Tyler closed your Main Street, we can't.
yeah, so they, it's like a whole organized thing, all the shops,
That was
all
a
the
commercial.
restaurants, walk
Players,
around.
right?
It's the one,
They're
the
the
only
800
place
pound
where I
gorilla.
go. and people
Yeah,
say,
right.
when they see the
I heard
KDTV.
Oracle's trying to.
Oh, Channel 63.
So Oracle about 8 years ago started from the ground up and made their own product for municipal government.
Okay.
It actually ranks higher in Tyler, and it's
Saturday night,
CT ranked it higher
Yeah,
as
so
well.
that's what I
Okay.
I'll run through about September.
No,
I
well,
love
price was a
the
part of it,
pull
but
their cars out of this.
Yeah, so everything's pre
they don't have the
1972.
entire solution.
Participants
Okay.
in this conference,
Then it'll be in development.
please announce yourself.
You know, Tony just.
Good morning, everybody.
It's his phone.
We're just getting started. We've got some slow numbers, there's some traffic on the road. Hopefully we'll have a few more join us. Thank you for dialing in. So your comment was, what time does a 8:30 meeting start? And the answer is 8:30 and we're 2 minutes late, but I appreciate everybody for coming this morning. In case I miss names, I'm going to pass this sign up sheet and I'll make sure I'll catch those on the phone. Thank you for coming to our broadband meeting for the month of November. And what I'd like to do is just go around the table. I'm looking forward to catching up. There's been a lot going on. We've got a lot to share. And there's a lot of things happening in terms of where we're gonna go and what's happening for 2020. And hopefully we'll be able to touch on all those things. So why don't we go around the table first, starting with off the table, and then we'll come back full circle and jump on the phone and see who's there as well.
Bill Bartels, EDC.
Philip Denise with GeoLinks.
Jamie Fleming, Ojai.
Bob Allen, KDTV.com.
Mitchell Cameron, City of Ventura.
Keith Brooks, Auckland.
Cesar Perez, Impulse.
On the phone, one at a time.
Brian Chong, City of Moore Park.
Hi, Brian.
Joe Carell, I'm the Joe Advisors.
Joe, thank you for joining us.
Good morning, all. Good morning, Wes Holzer here.
Wes Holzer, I got your name. Thank you for joining us, Wes.
Thank you, Bill.
And who else?
This Christopher Moore, California Public Utility Commission.
Christopher, thank you for joining us. I appreciate you dialing in and you must be in LA today.
I am.
Appreciate you. Looking forward to sometime when we could have a meeting that corresponds with your trips north.
Yeah, hopefully good.
Okay, so let's start going forward in our slide deck and talk a little bit about this new phase that we have. My computer's a little bit slow, so you'll have to bear with me.
We're live.
So in terms of today's agenda, we've gone through the self-introductions. I'm gonna have a slide that talks about some of the changes we have on our new contract and some of the other things beyond our CPUC activities that we're gonna be involved with. I wanna give the cities, Brian, Keith, Mitchell, Jamie from Ojai, opportunities to give your own updates in terms of where your communities are. I want to talk a little bit about smart cities. George Amendola just walked in.
Good morning.
And that's, hopefully we'll be able to get out in time, if not a little bit before. That's
No coffee.
That's the game. So with that as our agenda, this is a very busy chart. It provides an overview of the focus areas. I look at the area in the gray being what we've done traditionally in the past, somewhat, and I think we're gonna be continuing to focus on that. And I'll talk about each one of those. We're also gonna be focusing on the outcomes and what difference we'll make and the deliverables. One of the big differences from the CPUC, Greg Hayward just walked in, so I'm trying to keep everybody abreast of who's walking in the door as it happens. I'm also kind of embarrassing you guys for showing up.
Yeah, thanks.
I knew that was a call out.
So let me go through and discuss these as an overview. Connecting rural communities is really been the heart and soul of the Advanced Services Fund from CPUC. CPUC's provided us with these maps. There's first right to refusals for telecoms that already cover that. We're going through a period where they're picking and choosing, Mr. Sawyer.
Hey, good morning, sorry I'm late.
That just walked in.
Sorry.
We're getting demerits for being late.
I'm right.
I only get one donut.
You gotta pay for it too.
So, and let me back up a little bit in terms of the two tasks here for CPUC. In the past, when the consortium have applied for the funding, we had the opportunity to provide specific proposals to what we were interested in doing, what we wanted to do, and they would fund the proposals that we proposed. This time around, all of the consortia basically received a statement of work, and they said, this is what we're asking you to do. And so we really didn't have a lot of clarity. I mean, we had a lot of clarity. We didn't have a lot of flexibility in deviating at all from what the primary charter, the primary interest of CPUC is. And that really is rural communities. And I put the word about the fourth utility, but it's municipality support and digital literacy partnerships. Those are the things that are of the mainstream interest by the Public Utilities Commission. And so we're gonna wanna focus on the outline areas of the regions and the priority areas, making the projects. And I know that there's a number of companies that are already there. Yields been one of those. We're gonna create more of these meet and greet forums between providers and municipalities. And then something we haven't done, but we're going to do is do everything we can do to help get the grants applied for, get the forms filled, get the grants submitted, the paper into the desk for evaluation for funding. So to the point that we can actually help write the grants, that's being encouraged for us. And we've never gotten that far. We've left it up to, the telecommunications firm to be the one submitting it, but now they're saying, provide whatever resources, whatever support that's needed, get the applications in to close these gaps. So that's what the rural communities aspect is. I'm looking forward to the municipality updates because I think we have helped move the ball forward from all of our local communities. And we're gonna continue to maintain that theme and be a catalyst for those conversations. We're advocating each community think about what a community network would look like and how that would work. And the whole aspect of digital literacy is going to be key. But this overall, what's really happening is this is looking more and more like, what is a smart city? And what's that conversation, and how does that conversation work? And I was really, really impressed with what the city of Oxnard did with the help of sponsorship of Ventura and Thousand Oaks with the autonomous vehicle discussion last week. There was a great presentation at Oxnard College. The speaker was top notch. And in terms of public policies of autonomous vehicles, that's just one vertical, transportation, to what we need to be thinking about, wrapping our heads around, trying to understand, come to grips with. I mean, these are transformational times. I'm hoping, and your city manager said it, we need to have a speaker series. You know, and as a consortia, I believe transportation is one vertical, healthcare is another vertical. I mean, all of these smart city verticals, public safety is a vertical. We need to find the speakers. We need to bring the speakers in. We need to have those conversations and use it as a real catalyst to ushering in the discussion, the policy, the technologies, and the implementation issues that we're gonna have and up our game in terms of preparing the way in the public's consciousness of what a smart city looks like and how it works. So that's kind of what this fourth utility is. Broadband is just the infrastructure. We need to be also going into the next step of what rides on that infrastructure and how would it work, what's gonna need to support. If everybody's getting educated through augmented reality, I mean, how does that work? How does that play? How's that gonna reshape who we are and what we do? So anyway. And then the last one is, it's kind of a, it's the essence of collaboration. You know, I think we're gonna, you know, spend a tremendous amount of effort doing what we've done in the past, and that is, you know, answering the mail for the Public Utilities Commission, but we also want to provide ourselves the opportunity and forum for collaboration and other funding. We'll be starting for Caltrans through a grant in the first part of the year, and they want to do analysis of vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gases, and you know, trying to find alternative ways to actually putting cars on roads. We're doing this in Southern California under the SCAG, the area regional governments, and we're doing it with 2 or 3 other consortia. So the consortia here in the South are banding together to provide this analysis of our respective areas with Caltrans funding, and so that's going to be new and different, receiving funds related to Caltrans. We're going to continue with our regional forums. I'm balancing now of the future of work versus smart city discussions. I'm not sure which way we'll go, but I'm thinking that we'll make that decision before the end of the year and look for something in the spring based on the speakers we can come up with. And so come January, we'll want to maybe run an agenda by you to think about. And then I like the idea of pilot projects for smart city technologies, really trying to figure out whether it's autonomous vehicles or other things, trying to figure out what we can do in that area as a catalyst. So that's outcomes. We have certain deliverables tied to the CPUC funding that we have. This is 3 years. So, you know, it's not gonna be a start, stop situation. We can build some momentum from this as we go on, and looking forward to that. Any questions? Hi.
Coffee.
Yes, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Our angel arrives. I have a couple of questions, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
Did I lose my spot from
And I'm
tonight?
sorry, we showed up this morning and we don't have the Polycom. I hope that this is gonna you'll have to speak up if you're on the phone and yell maybe, and you'll have to speak up so the folks on the phone.
Me speak up?
Yes.
That's a first. Do we have any idea of what the money is like for the grant process? Do we have any kind of idea what the pool is?
We know how much CPUC is funding the consortia, 150K a year for the next 3 years.
But as far as the grant application process, is that extraneous to us?
The grant for
the first Connect Rural Communities, it says grant application assistance.
Oh, it's those, I don't have I can forward you the legislation and
Okay.
you maybe, Philip, you might know, I don't know how much the CSF pot of money is, but it's gazillions almost, I mean, not
330 million over 10 years.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, less than I made last year, so that's good.
And it's amazing when you see the
And
applicants,
share.
it's amazing when you see the applicants come through, and with their request out of that money, because they're large amounts. I mean, they're sizable grants that the applicants are coming in the millions. And so these are the hard spots. We're going through a situation like we did when they first rolled out the telephone. When you get out into a farmland in the ag area and there's a house by itself, you gotta connect it. It may cost a lot and there may be only one resident. We're doing the same thing now with broadband. It may cost a lot, there may be only a few. That's a role for government to try to close that gap, and that's what the funding is for. It's the hard to get to regions.
Good. And then the second thing is this an opportunity for us to put together a presentation to provide the city councils in our areas?
Yes, absolutely. Good idea.
One question? Yes. I heard you say something about first right of refusals for carriers, incumbent carriers. Could you clarify that a little bit? I think I misunderstood. Is that for the grants? Is that for deployment in rural areas? What is that specifically regarding?
That is, yes, that is about the grants, and it is in the rural areas. If you look at the area map, and you probably know this far better than I do, you know, you'll see that certain telecoms are, that's their.
So licensed telecoms?
Yes.
Okay, they're gonna get a first right of refusal on infrastructure?
On the CSF grant.
On the CSF grant, thanks, Sean.
So if I wanna go to Santa Paula or Spectrum or Frontiers,
Right.
meeting the high speed need,
Right.
it's gonna be blocked. And if it's in an area where they're not meeting the high speed need, but it's closer to infrastructure, I go apply for a grant, they can have the first right.
Yeah, so they can
I
say,
plan on doing
that's our area, we'd like to do it ourselves, and then you can't get the grant, even though it's going to that area, because that's an area that they typically would serve.
But that's narrowly focused on the CSF funding?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So for most of the CLECs that I've seen, outside of the episodes and things like that, we're kind of letting 80, 60, 65 just pass. It's not very attractive.
Right.
With the Lift America Act coming down, with potential 40 billion in the pot for the rest of the country, most of that's gonna, not most, a lot of that's gonna float in California.
And that's most likely specific for rural, it wouldn't affect like Oxnard, Ventura, Camarillo, Santa Paula.
So different than the Connect America Fund, which was just focused on residential, a LIFT is actually finally combining what we consider funding silos in the past, and it is looking at an entire community and saying, can you connect the anchor institutions, can you connect the native lands, can you connect the residences, can you connect the rural opportunities and the
Hmm.
So healthcare, all of that kind of stuff,
Right.
gets put into a pot, as opposed to right now when you go through, USAC, right, you can't use school funding to get E-rate dollars to build out, extend that to 10 years. But it's more gonna be looking at a swatch of territory and saying, we wanna build out.
So they finally tightened up all those rules.
That's what's being proposed right now, it hasn't made it through, but, most of the, like I said, the smaller CLECs that I've been talking to, 80, 60, 65, unfortunately with the first right of refusal and the current definition of state broadband, there's gonna be a lot of areas that get locked up with reinvestment in copper by Frontier.
Right.
That don't make sense for us to break into.
Interesting. So, high level, the focus is rural. And where I've always had a misunderstanding is in this tri-county area in Ventura County. The rural areas look like they're more like the mountain ranges.
High level, the focus is the entire region. For the first focus area, going back. Let me go back. For the first focus area, we're rural, but for the next two focus areas, we're gonna be dealing with, you know, and that's been our primary bread and butter, CPUC funding, and their primary focus is rural. On the other hand, CPUC has given us great data for the municipalities. We've taken that data forward. I think we've made a difference. There is this general desire for the CPUC on our behalf as Consortium to work with electeds in all the municipalities and to continue to spread this broadband message, to work with the telecoms in each of the municipalities and continue to increase capacity. I mean, that is still within our charter, and it's not just rural, it's in all cities. So at the high, I don't wanna say we're exclusively doing rural at the high level, that's not the case.
Does the CPUC recognize this as the fourth utility? Because if that's the case, then that is all moot.
I think, yeah, I'm very sure the CPUC does,
Well,
but we have had
But have they
elected,
declared that?
we have had elected that have sat there in assembly hearings that say, I've got, 3 bars,
They
what's the
take our
problem?
money, make us
I
a
mean,
regulated public utility, so.
The CPUC also recognizes that the electeds may not get it, they may not understand.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that if they were pushing it,
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, and they are, that's why they're bringing funds to us,
okay.
is to work the local area and provide that education.
Because that's a big hurdle that we haven't gone over before.
Right. Okay, so I wanted to just pause after going through this and ask you guys to be critics. We've been together for a year or two or more in some cases. And I'd like to, just kind of ponder and say what's worked and what hasn't, we're still in this beginning of a 3-year cycle. If there are things that we haven't been doing or we could certainly do better, I'd like to try to identify that and put a focus on that. And, I'm just kind of rounding out our work plan over the 2 holidays coming up, and so I would really invite whatever constructive, words of, improvement would be helpful, so. any thoughts?
Achievable?
Yeah, achievable. Yeah, I'm critical already of communications and, some of the things we could be doing better in terms of social media. We've talked, that's a holy grail that we haven't been able to conquer just yet. You've gone through your own situations in the municipalities. I'm not sure we've been there when you needed us for all the time, but we will certainly try. But, I guess I want an open forum to just kind of talk about where can we provide the most value in the next 3 years?
One of the things, and it's a missing group here, that I see, I don't see anyone here from the education community. Isn't that one of the biggest things that broadband is really going to do? Is really bring, the education of the next generation? Isn't that what this whole thing is really all about, to get our children and grandchildren?
It's certainly an area that can benefit, but healthcare, transportation, social equality, all those kind of things play a role. And as the water rises, all boats rise, so.
Yeah, but you gotta.
And we
put
had
those
Mr.
in-
Kerr, and we had, somebody from the education department that was very active in this. And then with the transition, I think that they've, not been engaged, so maybe that's on us.
Yeah.
The speed
On
dating.
the topic of digital inclusion, I know the event that Steve Sawyer put on with representatives from Oxnard College was very much focused on that. There is work being done, it's just maybe not as represented in the room as it is right now.
Good point.
Yeah.
I will say, having been to almost every broadband consortium now across the entire state, I've seen people who are thriving and people who are not, and I would, as just being objective and critical, and say we're kind of middle of the road. I've seen areas that are desperate for broadband, doing desperate measures, and, Martha, the Inland Empire Broadband Consortium, she's done a lot with PR. She made, and I think getting the community involved with, trying to do a cookout and gave away Chromebooks or something like that.
Really?
You had thousands of people show up. So you came into a block party, essentially. You did some online training to figure out your digital literacy, and if you completed the class within that time, you walked away with a Chromebook.
Everybody likes free.
Yeah.
Well, it's, Martha is a very innovative thinker. She's really an interesting personality, and she's got endless energy.
So just saying, like, the PR front, it's not that we're not probably moving the needle in 1,000 different directions, it's.
It's really, she's not one to be underestimated, she's really good.
And so I've seen other people up north, like David Espinosa with the northern one that comes out of Chico. And they don't get as much PR, but they've got a lot of, GIS help with his help, and
Right.
putting out maps and constantly being a resource. And then I'd say the last thing, a lot of the other consortiums have focused less, I think, on grants, and figuring out where the funding is, and going to the providers and saying, what is the problem? The problem tends to be permitting.
The permitting?
Yeah. And so what they've done is kind of get together and figure out where we're deploying and figuring out the ordinances and helping educate those smaller providers who don't have, huge back offices to deal with it. Saying, here's the ordinances for co-location, or here's where the conflict is, really helping map out the project. And talking to the local officials, and if the ordinances are up to date, helping educate them and saying, do you want this project deployed in your area? That's been my experience over the last, been traveling for the last 9 months.
Yeah, well, that's been very, that's very helpful for us.
Does consortium leadership across the country come together?
Across the state, I don't know about other states, but,
It'd be interesting to lead,
yeah, we
you know,
certainly.
and try to get everybody at least on a conference call or something so we can, best practices.
We used to do that, there's been some flux at CPUC and,
Yeah, sure, but
stops and, fits and starts, but, there's a history of occasionally doing that, but, that's very practical.
And then I think on the smart city initiative, I think everyone wants to think big, and autonomous vehicles are great, but Oxnard's got their RFP out for smart water meterings, like Camarillo hasn't even finished drafting theirs, Thousand Oaks is still, and there's baby steps we can be taking with like lower land technology, and figuring out the ordinances to get the IoT gateways installed, everything to support the future of the infrastructure.
We gotta take the conversations to that level. You're absolutely correct.
So, I mean, I have an autonomous vehicle and it works just fine. Like, I'm not sure what this new technology is gonna do, for my autonomous vehicle. I drive it every single day, it gets me where I want to go to be safe. So if there was more infrastructure, like I have to drive it down the 150 to the freeway. That's not changing my life, right? As much as what Santa Paula's going through, having to increase water costs, 15% over the next 5 years. And still not even doing anything on smart water, just so their water district doesn't go bankrupt.
So I'm inspired to think about the community as a system. I mean, we've gotta put some systems thinking into the conversation. It's just not one vertical of connectivity anymore. But it is, how does the codependence of the technologies and the infrastructure on the various aspects of community. Yeah, and transportation being one, other utilities being another, communications being one, education being one. I think that we're gonna have to figure out ingenious ways to broaden the future smart conversation.
social equity, smart cars are elitist, no offense, Phil. But, I mean, it is one of those things where only the privileged get to have, at this point, those kind of opportunities.
But that was
Whereas
the same with cell
education and
phones.
healthcare are ubiquitous.
Yeah, he's right. Yeah, it started out that way, like cell phones did.
Motorcycle.
We'll get to a level of the adoption curve and everybody will have.
So my takeaway from your very good points you're making are that there's low-hanging fruit out there. So there's small victories you can start to get. Another thing I heard was PR. So there's a website, I think, that's put together, that you guys put together, but there could also be outreach from that, like a newsletter that brings you back to that and gets closer, or blog or something like that, and then start increasing that list of people who get that.
Yeah, I mean, syndication amongst the groups too, like I've got a list of, a couple of thousand people, Ventura's got a list of people, so.
But what I like about that is we've been keeping the conversation has been kept very high level for a long time, and these are some victories that can be had in the short term, I think. We start to build,
Trust and relationships.
Yeah, exactly.
We're probably gonna fail, that's how we learn, right? Like, if we do a Chromebook thing and it doesn't work out, okay, well, what did we do wrong? Right? Trying to figure out how to do it perfect, I think is gonna take 3 years, or.
Doing it over and over once iterated.
But maybe it should be, every quarter or every half year or something, say, all right, we're gonna go after 3 initiatives. One of them is we're gonna have this event, where we're gonna give away things and get awareness out in the community. Another one might be, let's go help Santa Paula with, and you have your 3 goals, and then you just focus on those 3 things. And then the next quarter, you focus on 3 more things.
And create the PR after you accomplish them.
But I like the idea of having project-based accomplishments that are utilizing broadband technologies, right? For example, we started AMI 2 years ago, right? It's a really complicated project for cities that we're still not done with it. We're still building out the infrastructure. You see these other cities going through this, we can, be an enabler and be supportive. Then we have the industry experts who can help, provide some of the guidance, provide the services to really improve the desired outcome. It's been a struggle for us. It's a big project, and I would say we're not necessarily experts, right? We're learning, and it requires this sort of relationship building to improve upon it.
So maybe we focus into baby steps.
Yeah.
Set your big goal and then say, what can we do this quarter? What can we do the next quarter?
And I think one thing we miss sometimes is broadband is one piece, but what do we get from broadband? What's the outcome, and how do we use it? And I think that's, being in the city manager's office, I'm able to kind of work with council to explain some of the outcomes that broadband can bring, but I think sometimes it's so focused on internet, right? But not on the smart city applications, not on the building efficiencies within cities. That is what they're really concerned with. Obviously, there's a social equity piece and whatnot, but sometimes we need to communicate what we actually get. What's the why for broadband? I think maybe like a newsletter, something so simple as that. I think helps communicate that. That may not be it, but.
I think, people don't know what they don't know. It's
Yeah.
one of my favorite sayings, so.
Yeah.
So, I'm just wondering, as we move forward.
Piggybacking on that though, I think it's not only the why, but targeting the who. Because we need to have a narrative of, hey, no one wants to hear, hey, this city has a plan now, or hey, we're doing an RFP. Even though those are big things to the public, they're thinking like, hey, this big employer just moved to this city because they were after broadband, the city helped. Or here's a kid who doesn't have internet at home who now goes to the library and can do all of his homework, and making it very narrative driven rather than kind of facts driven will help in the outreach, and it will increase engagement on the information we do put out. Something like a blog, I think, is a much better forum than occasional news stories, in my opinion, because you can, again, build that narrative.
Very well said, Brian. Thank you.
So, like, looking back, okay, lessons learned. My observation, participating in this group now for 3.5 years roughly, is we have the community stakeholders in the room. We have the people representing the various cities, county, etc. We have them engaging. And actually, what you said, Mitchell, is light years ahead of where we started 3.5 years ago in this discussion. I'm happy to have you participating, and your comments are well received. Do you think that we need the audience to be staff, council, strategic plans? Does some of this need to get into a strategic plan with each of the cities or the county?
I think that's happening. I think if you look at the county's general plan, broadband is, playing a major role in their general plan. I think we'll see that with Thousand Oaks. I think we'll see that with City of Ventura. I think it's going to be built into the general plan at some level. We're going through that update process now. And again,
smart cities, IoT, autonomous vehicles.
I don't know if we'll get down to that level necessarily. I think, to be quite frank, I don't know if council members would necessarily come to this meeting. I think they rely on us to communicate the outcomes of this meeting, and we do that. And I think, even working with Bill, I think we're going through a pretty large project right now, building out, broadband infrastructure project. And I've spoken to him about getting some insight and learning. We work with EDVC to kind of get their insight. And I think that's how we use this group, and I would love to use it more, but it's not like I walk away from this meeting and don't talk about it. I talk to my boss, I talk to our economic development committee. I think they are getting the information, right? I think they could benefit from more, but I think there's a variety of different priorities, and this is one of them, right?
Well, so that's my question. Who the audience is, I think you've defined that. And then what are those priorities as it relates to what we've been discussing here moving forward? Do they need to be identified outside of just broadband? Do we need to say we're gonna incubate IoT technology in our communities? Are we going to participate, they do participate in SCAG, but does that need to be in their general plan? Because what I've noticed in participating in this is if it is not clearly defined in their priorities, it just does not happen. It gets just kind of next,
So
unless it's on some kind of agenda or some kind of list or goal.
So disaster preparedness is on everybody's list and goals. Are we leveraging that as well as we could?
I would say from firsthand knowledge, no.
Well,
Well, I've got 160 fire cameras deployed across the state. Ventura County has the least amount of them due to the CUP and permitting process between the individual cities and the county itself. Our fire groups caught the Maria fire from both the Laguna side and then right up until our site burned down. I'm sitting on South Mountain.
Right.
But we're going to be deploying 1,100 more throughout the state over the next probably 2 years. And based on the existing permitting process, I love Ventura, but it cost me $90,000 to permit a renewable energy tower that was 6 feet off the ground. We're going to put them in other places.
We are Cardinal, figure it out there.
Yeah.
One, it took a year and a half to, right?
To answer your question though, I've been thinking about that a lot, and, we're kind of in a new normal, and it's not pretty. And so with the problems that the energy companies, Edison and PG&E are having, we sincerely expose the vulnerability that our communications systems are having. And I don't know who leads that discussion, I don't know where that discussion occurs, but it's certainly, it was ironic, I was at an IHUB meeting where we're talking about data sharing in the midst of I think it was the Marie fire, one of the fires, maybe it's been the Tick fire over there, anyway. And we're sitting there and we're not, they go through the whole cycle of preparation, response, and resiliency, on this resiliency cycle, and we're not. I mean, we don't have this fundamental piece of when the power goes out and comms starts dropping in certain places, how do you exercise the exercises that you've been doing all along in preparation, because it's a fundamental flaw. I think that we've had a general assumption in the public safety community that you're gonna have power. It's just
Well, the PUC had a hearing on that
Yeah.
yesterday.
Yeah,
All the
so.
time.
I think I went 8 days in October and then finally I made the call.
And so the new normal is not pretty, and I think it's exposed some vulnerabilities, and broadband has to be really hardened, in the military term, it's gotta be very hardened in its ability to survive those kinds of catastrophic events.
Well, I think Philip made a good point about the redundancy of utilizing LoRaWAN.
Well, and it's power redundancy as well. I mean, we just unfortunately have known for quite some time that Edison and PG&E were just gonna not be reliable.
And if I could, this is Chris, BCPC, just jump in, this is, yes, that's correct, it's a conversation that we're leading. We just opened up a new proceeding, we had the premier conference yesterday with the various telecom providers. The backup is partly a responsibility of the electric utilities, but also their responsibility on the telecom companies too, and that conversation is being had right now.
That's great, Chris. I think that we want to follow that conversation closely. At the same time, locally, we want to do everything we can do to, provide you that conversation, all of our feedback and support, and try to be a catalyst locally to close these gaps. That's great feedback. Thank you, Steve, in terms of the update from yesterday.
I haven't watched it yet, but you can pull it up, it's on the PUC's website.
Yeah.
Bill, going back to skip over it, if the governor's office is sort of saying fourth utility, one of the things is to reach the governor's office and say that needs to be an explicit message and it needs to be a drumbeat, because when he does it, it's stunning to watch. There is no non-clarity, but it also allows then the breaking down of silos discussion. So maybe the low-hanging fruit is to reach back into the economic development side of the house over there to get Mendaka, to say, okay, look, this is the message, so that you can look at, the Internet of Things versus this huge, big vision, so there's room for any little piece. Cause I think sometimes what happens in this group and in many of the groups where we're talking about economic development is it goes back to the assumption, oh yeah, everyone understands what that is. Well, that's not true. Council members are perfect. And yet those are the policy folks who can actually drive this. Yeah, I can do this thing that I couldn't do before for half the cost. Because in a lot of cases, the water system issue is, if you look at it from a broader economic basis, making it less expensive is possible by lowering footprint. So, rating meters.
What's the status on Dig Once legislation? And it seems those discussions have sort of fallen aside.
Yes, I don't have the status.
Legislation, it's, local ordinances that cover Dig Once and Joint Trench, so we're working on ours, revising ours, and one of the recommendations with, Joe, who's on the line from Magellan. So we have a committee meeting, great success putting together a template for Dig Once that's been successful across the nation. And probably will include a joint trench as a feature within it. And then there's decisions to be made locally as to what will work for each municipality or county.
Are you doing that at the staff level recommending to council to adopt something like that? Or has council said, you know, we want this?
No, we're taking it to, we added it as an item in our fiber master plan that will go to council. This is something that needs to take action on. Attached is a resolution number X, and here's how we define Dig Once and joint trench within the city and for those who want to dig, wherever they are. And joint trench, if you're AT&T and you want to dig, you have to give the ability for someone else to lay conduit along yours or leave space in your conduit to them. So it follows along with public works in your ordinance for the road cuts. When can you dig up the road? When can you not dig it up? How much of the road do you have to repave depending on the amount that you cut up and where it is in the ordinance expiration.
So you have buy-in from the other departments,
Yeah.
water?
We have a technology
public
governance
utilities.
subcommittee that spans across all the departments. The main players are legal, public works, probably the big one, community development in terms of permitting, and IT.
Right?
So your question prompted us, it's a good time to move to the next agenda. And I wanna give each of the cities, municipalities a chance to just give their own updates. We've called it a municipality roadmap in the past, but when we first started this, we had a process of engagement, talking about the need. Brian Ganley and I will be talking to the EDC board of directors this afternoon, and each of the city reps are on that board of directors. We're gonna be providing them with an update. You know, but it's out of this room comes this shared vision of where we're gonna go and how we're gonna get there. We engage the stakeholders in the processes we've talked about. We've been encouraging everybody to try to get their arms wrapped around their assets, connecting the anchor institutions, creating the community networks, and then get into this collaborative development. Well, everybody is trying to mix it up, and eventually get to this through technology innovation, this smart city. So that's at the highest level. It's time to drill down, and the way you do it is day in and day out, what these guys are doing. Brian, do you wanna go first in terms of your update, and then we'll wrap around and catch a few of the others?
Sure. So on the more parts side, our big thing that we can share is we are now under contract with Magellan Advisors as well, joining Ventura and Oxnard. We concluded our RFP process, and a couple weeks ago, the council awarded the contract to Magellan. Just to kind of share information with everyone in the room, we only had 2 respondents, which is actually a little lower than we wanted. But between Magellan, who has a lot of expertise in the space certainly, and a lot of synergy to be had with the large volume of local Ventura County specific knowledge, and of course, other part of it, or the second proposal we received was from Ernst and Young, from their municipal advisors division. And what they were pushing, like what they offered that was unique, was access to all of the Ernst and Young data across all of their clients, across all of their accounting and other consulting work that they do. So we brought them in for an interview and kind of said, well, what exactly do we get for that? And what they offered was insight into the telecom industry, saying that their original work in the space was to help the big telecoms identify what markets to enter, and they would do very, very large economic analysis to identify that. When it came to the decision point for our council and for our committee of staff members, the reality is Moorpark is sufficiently small that I don't need mass analysis and hard data to know that I have 3 business parks and they're located here, here, and here. So we opted to go with Magellan. We're very happy to do that. Looking at what in our plan, and actually the slide that Bill has on the screen now is pretty good. We've identified the leadership already. We have a council vision, going, but the other things are exactly what it is. We have in there to conduct the asset inventory, identify the key institutions and potential large employers who could individually warrant investment, and all the way down actually to the technology innovation. We put in an extra thing in ours to help evaluate smart city applications for the city. So again, we can have some of these actual deliverable things as opposed to saying, hey, we have a plan now, we're going to do these things. We can actually say, hey, we put in this streetlight attachment that's providing this extra service, things of that nature. The project is an 8-month project. We're kind of deciding internally, because we do have some internal stakeholders that we need to impress upon that, no, we really need this and we want to do this. And of course, the week before Thanksgiving is not the best time to roll out something like that. So we're deciding internally if we want to try to start that 8-month process, wait until the new year when everyone is here, or if we want to do it as soon as possible, but realize that we're going to lose basically a lot of our staff for a few weeks during the holidays. Kind of piggybacking on what Keith was saying too, we are expecting a dig once policy and various other kind of regulatory procedural things to come through with it. We do have a little added challenge because 2 of the 3 biggest streets in Moorpark and the ones that are most likely to contain infrastructure are actually state highways for which we don't have regulatory or permitting control over, so we'll have to figure out how we can best address that. But we are looking forward to getting a pragmatic plan that we can really use the checklist and then work on those actual specific smart city applications, and hopefully we get something out there that we can push out to the public and say, look, this is why we're doing this and this is why you should support this.
Thank you, Brian.
And Brian, this is Joe from our internal planning at Magellan. Unless we hear differently, we're assuming that kickoff will be after the new year.
10-4. I think that's where we're headed.
Mitchell, you want to follow up? Your own perspective?
Yeah, so we concluded our Magellan study back in July. Following that, just to update the room, I think that most people know, we released a broadband infrastructure RFP. We did a council workshop in early September that presents the results of that broadband infrastructure RFP. We're looking to go back to council on December 9th, tentatively, with a recommendation. And that's about it, as of right now. So I provided a more in-depth update last time now.
Yeah. We'll be on standby to help you wherever you want us to be.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that.
Yeah. Keith?
Did I hear December 9th there, Mitch?
Yep.
Thank you.
And then in regards to the joint trench and dig once policy, that's something we're exploring. We want to get through the broadband infrastructure RFP before moving forward with that. But similar policy is what has been presented to Oxnard, and I'm sure will be presented more apart.
And ours is not submitted to a committee. We'll probably do a finance and governance committee first with our master plan from Magellan. Currently we've got about 11 items that one council will take action on. A few of them may be included, including dig once joint trench, or we may decide that it goes separately from the plan. That's the thing we're deciding on that. So, yeah, I think 2 points of clarification. One, you mentioned rural areas.
Yes.
It's actually unserved areas, correct?
Yes.
So if you look at the list in the map from the
The
city,
priority
you see
areas, yeah, it is unserved.
it's unserved areas, which are, all of our cities have some minor amount. Ventura has 911 locations that are considered unserved by the CPU definition. Fillmore, Seymour, Thousand Oaks has a bunch, Oxnard has very few. So it's not just the mountainous areas, so keep that in mind. Second thought is that we need to do the moonshot thinking, which I'm hearing from some of you, where we're looking at this as utility and figuring out a way that it is required for everyone. And that's what goes behind utility when you think about it in general. My son asked me when he was 7, Dad, how do you get rich? I told him, well, first you invent something, then you pass a law requiring everybody to buy it. And that's kind of the model I think we're gonna have to look at. We're talking about doing RFPs for LoRaWAN or advanced metering infrastructure, but how does that help broadband and internet, the unserved, and economic development? We're working with CPUC, Chris is on the phone, thank you. And I think we can learn from other cities that have done utility model and done a good job with it. Not all cities have utility, but most of us do have water and wastewater, trash, which are utilities that we don't think about as utilities. City of Chattanooga, I think, is a good model for us. They were able to leverage fiber and get laws passed to allow them to have fiber in the premise required for their interrupters for their electrical grid to make a smart grid. So I proposed that same idea to our partners at Google or Google Shop, as well as the AMI vendors that are bidding on these things, to see if we could leverage that same type of scenario for things like advanced meter infrastructure for water. Why can't we have the meter, the smart meter, not transmit just to a separate LoRaWAN or cellular network, but also transmit to the fiber network provided by the municipality within the premise as a redundant path? We're good at charging people as counties and cities. We're good at metering. We're not good at monitoring and reacting, which is what you want to do with any kind of smart IoT type device. We're not good at analysis, leveraging that for the next level of thinking. So if we start thinking big, utility-based model, assessment fees, maybe leveraging utilities and funds related to utilities for putting the infrastructure in place, much like City of Chattanooga did for electricity, maybe we can do the same thing for water and leverage that infrastructure and build out redundancies for metering, monitoring. All we are caring about now is, how can I send you a bill for your meter? Well, let's move that up to, how can I do smart metering, which is detecting if there is a overuse or a leak, narrowing the impact when there is service that needs to be done, or you're replacing a leak, replacing a valve, you're repairing a leak. If we can make that case, then suddenly high-speed internet becomes hand in hand with something everybody needs. So I think we need to move the thinking up a little bit. We're doing the master plan as well as a few others, but we're leveraging it more on the economic development side of the world. Just like most of us do. Yes, schools are a big part of that, and we're collaborating with them, but the reality is the big takers will be the businesses in the area that will either come to the area because of high-speed internet, or will stay in the area and expand their business because they need that. So, long list of things we want council to act on in our plan. We believe it's in a final version. Currently, our TechUp subcommittee and department heads will be reviewing it between now and Christmas. And then we will likely go to a couple of committees first, because of the committee structure, And then after a committee, probably find some governance being a big portion of it, then go to council January, February timeframe with whatever the committees decide, and we'll leave in it as action items. And kudos to Joan, they've done a good job with, helping us refine it to a point that we think it'll sell well,
Yeah.
conservatively.
It's a thorough report, thank you. A lot of good.
This is Joe. One other item, we implemented, well, I was involved in implementing the IT side, our smart metering infrastructure in Baltimore. We put smart meters in over 400,000 homes in Baltimore City, Baltimore County. So we should talk about that smart metering and the kinds of technology we used for collecting data and providing the ability for customers to then get inputs on what their usage patterns are, how they can control water, consumption, et cetera, if you get a chance.
That'd be good. I haven't heard of a location yet that's leveraging broadband, municipal or county provided broadband for smart metering. It's always a separate cellular network from AT&T with reduced rates, or it's a LoRaWAN technology and you're putting in some other towers around everywhere. Chattanooga's the only place I've heard of that's gotten laws passed and leveraged said that the fiber was required to, when there was an interruption, the fiber sends the signal back to their street operations center, network operations center, to send the message to their interrupters on their poles to reroute that electrical another direction, so that you'll see the city or a portion of it go from dark to less dark to maybe not dark at all, just from rerouting using broadband.
Very nice. We did not use that. We used a series of collectors and repeaters that could buffer data for up to 48 hours and retransmit once the cellular connection was made, and then all the data was delivered via fiber back to our 2 network operation centers, where we ran our software billing and consumption systems. We'll talk later.
Can you,
We did not have that fiber back, redundancy.
But the benefit, I guess, that you're pointing out too is in the electrical fund is then paying
Right.
for the fiber connection as
The-
opposed to a city's general fund.
The fourth utility concept married to the existing utilities, rather than a separate fourth utility.
good point.
Yeah, it's really,
Maybe
Then-
there's something
then-
there.
Then the funding rules even shift
Funding rules shift dramatically.
hugely.
and those rates, that bill can get then passed on to ratepayers as opposed to.
Well, and you can pitch value.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of just pitching it to the ratepayers, you can actually have the ratepayers say, yeah, there's value here.
Yeah, they're not required, the premise is not required to have high-speed internet. It's just there as a redundancy for a smart grid for the utility. Now, they can choose to pay $60 a month and have a gig internet. If they want, and probably it'll be in mass, people will go to it like they have in Chattanooga. So that's a concept that we're working on, and we're leaving our, plan room for opportunistic development. Because, pardon me, Joe, but the plans are estimates and guesses of areas that you want to venture into to see if it works. You don't have a guarantee in a plan, it's not a recipe, it's gonna guarantee you get a lovely batch of cookies out of it. It's just a general idea of where you wanna focus. So we're including utility and opportunistic areas as well. And then,
Right, and those are dynamic, right? Things will change
Yeah.
as your economic development team comes up with, different business parks and perhaps attracts new employers. Right?
Right.
It's not deterministic at all, I agree.
so we wanna leverage P3s, as probably all of you do, but we fully realize that every P3 has a different flavor of business that they go after. So we're not looking for one P3, we're gonna write our RFP or 2 RFPs such that it allows people to bid on whatever component of whatever piece of the pie best fits their area of expertise. And that'll be broad, it won't be just one thing only, that's all you get.
So the thought that occurred to me as you were talking was wanting to get more explicit about some of the Chattanooga stories.
Mhm.
You know, if we could, I wanna find out who the subject matter experts are, bring them out here for a forum, and really, you know, make them available to everybody and anybody that wants to find out more. I mean, that's a real value point I think we can provide, is if we can talk about smart metering, talk about some of these leveraging of the four utilities with other
That's great.
utilities. You know, who can we credibly bring, like the autonomous, the person that we brought in this last week from Michigan, I think it was. Who is the expert from Chattanooga that can help us, teach us, have some work sessions around the forum, and, you know, let's convene, a full day of conversation. You know, it might be public in the morning, and it might be among municipalities in the afternoon, and really drill down and have meaningful dialogue on this stuff this next year. It's great, we just need to get very focused, and like you were saying about quarterly, our quarterly goals. You know, find out what those three areas would be in terms of the context of what you're talking about, and let's go after those three experts, bring them into town, and see what we can do.
Zach Friend, a few years ago, made an excellent presentation about how Santa Cruz overcame permitting and other obstacles. I think that a revisiting and an update from him would be really insightful.
Yeah, he was a good speaker, a great story.
One of the things that keeps jumping out is that a distributed utility where, redundancy stops being backup, but it's actually integrated redundancy. That's what you're talking about.
Right.
So when we regulate a backup plan, that means the permitting's APCD or whatever your other alternative, now we're back to a year and a half and $90,000 versus scalable, integrated redundancy so that the system gets smarter and more resilient. So it becomes a design function. If that's how you legislate a utility, that gets really interesting.
That's a concept that I visited Chattanooga, and Brent, their CIO, I'm sure he'd join us for our call and tell us all the hurdles and battles they went through legislatively with their commissions and the state as well. But it was a little bit depressing seeing huge infrastructure, 7-story buildings, beautiful everything, billboards all over the city talking about high-speed internet available, and it's a little overwhelming because they have electrical utility that they leverage. Downside is that no one outside that utility gets to play because they've leveraged the utility for that. But then I thought, well, the rest of us have utilities too, just not the same kind. That's the independent, require everybody to buy it, get rich scheme for myself. The same kind of concept. If it's required for your infrastructure, then you've got a funding vehicle there that you can leverage legally to get some of the infrastructure in place.
So I think redundancy has to be a part of it, it's just
That's the whole thing.
the life that we live. Enterprises are already caught on the SD-WAN, I'm sure you're familiar with it. Most of enterprises are bringing in multiple connections, and it's no longer, can I get one fiber provider? It's can I get two? Can I get spectrum, cable modem, and can I get wireless?
And LTE.
Yeah, and everything in there. I mean, I've got 2 power sources and 2 internet connections in my home to keep me running when the power goes out, or if I have any sort of issues. And that's gonna become, I think, even more ubiquitous once it is done penetrating the enterprise world into the residents.
So that's what Chris Moore was alluding to with the discussions at the CPC.
Yeah, and same with power, you know, just relying on the power grid's not gonna do it. Like, everything is going to have to go into, we're getting away from diesel generators, and it's mostly gonna be solar and battery backups, because it's a lower cost per kilowatt, will run a lot longer, and it's rechargeable, and I don't have to send a guy up a mountain with a 95-gallon tank of diesel, right, every 4 or 5 days.
In regards to redundancy, what about supporting a local hub?
Local hub, for what?
In case one washer goes down, or we have any kind of, overwhelming emergency that they can't, it's redundancy.
Yeah, we're gonna have to come from the south and come from the north. I mean, it's, maybe even come from the east. I mean, we do need to plan for redundancy in terms of points of presence.
Well, the meeting we went to,
It'd
they
be a
were,
lot easier if the PUC or state legislator would take a lead on this. rather than it being all individual and, participation by desire.
Well, the challenge is that that lead would, if it comes from the state, there's that tendency to one size fits all versus distributed redundancies where best practice fits local. So that sort of gentle look, there's a lot of smart people in the state of California. Let's get support from the legislature to have these large moonshot goals and then give some,
Autonomy.
well, and flexibility about how you meet the goals.
We did a survey recently of the Oxnard residents, and I think it's fascinating that the number one concern of the population was clean water. I figured it would be illegal dumping, graffiti, public safety, just clean water. So there's something there.
What kind of response rate did you
Conversation.
get to the survey?
I can share it with you if you want.
No, I'm just thinking in terms of the census. You know, we're just always having to try to figure out how to communicate with our constituents and how do we get them to respond, you know? And it would be interesting to see what your response rate was like and who was responding and from what areas, you know? We start overlaying these data maps and we can see, you know, hard to reach for the census, but willing to say we don't want our water to go bad, you know?
Jamie, can you give us a quick Ojai update?
Sure. Well, we're so small, and the complexities is humbling to listen to what everyone else is dealing with. But we have, since the last meeting, entered phase one. We've had terrific meetings with members of the city council and other stakeholders to start creating the vision. We've also been meeting with some broadband fiber optic companies. And we've just launched a week ago the asset inventory process, including sanitation. I had no idea we can run the fiber optics through a lot of the sanitation piping now that they have the sleeves that they use. And of course our water, Casillas Water, and our public works people. So we're really kind of trying to move fast in a sense to get our arms around what a little community like Ojai can do, because obviously our ultimate goal is to be able to attract, you know, some industries maybe to look at Ojai. But I have been so blessed that Bill and the Pacific Consortium is here because they've been giving us great guidance, so I want to give you a kudo on that. And just hearing some of these comments, smart cities, I just want to keep in the loop because we're small, but we sure don't want to be in the dark ages after everyone else moves forward. So I love hearing all these conversations.
Yeah, all the same needs. Small sailboat, you do all the same.
Oh yeah,
things.
no, that's what I'm saying. I know you know what we're up against, it's just still the complexities of the
Differences.
industries and the size.
You
and all
can turn a
that
small
you're doing.
sailboat a lot faster than you can a big sailboat.
That's what I was gonna say, it might be easier to do something.
No, but I keep being told that by the companies that come to talk to us, go, oh, compared to what we have to deal with, this, you can be a little more nimble.
When are you gonna publish your book of Keithisms?
It's gonna be in my, art of saying nothing. That would be a government bureaucrat.
So this is, I don't know if you've had a chance to look through the slides and look at this particular slide. This is kind of a fun thing I wanted to throw out. I hope it works. Cable Labs, and Cable Labs is a company which it's a not-for-profit communications company in which the cable companies have all invested in. They do some forward thinking about where communities are going, and done a marvelous job of coming up with compelling stories. And I'm really thrilled to death with the fact that this entity exists and the fact that it's supported by the industry, because in each of these things, these vignettes, and this was about 5 minutes, it leaves you saying, I gotta see that again because I didn't catch it all. You know, and so I ran across this last week as a new one. I don't think I shared it with you yet because I wanted you to see it this way. And it's one of those things that I'll send you the link, you're gonna wanna see it again. They've had one that is the family perspective, and it shows augmented reality and playing kids with grandma who's across the country kind of thing. It's amazing. They have another one that I think we showed at one of our forums about healthcare, taking care of seniors, and what are all the tools.
Where'd that come from?
Cable Labs. I'll send you the link, all three of these. But this is a new one, and so it's gonna be fun, and you give us something to talk about when it's over. So hopefully we can do this. I'm gonna play it this way.
Could be the jet lag talking, but I'm ready for this day. Nikki, you've got everything you need. Just go for it. Here, can you check the address again? Confirmed. Straight from the boss. Go get them. Is this it? Is what it? Coffee? No thanks, I just need a second, okay? Alice, where am I? Right where you should be, and 30 minutes early. Hey! Hey! Alice, give me a meeting with Devin and Maya ASAP. Destination? Follow that car. There are 17 vehicles in need. The red one. Wait, why are you in the car? I lost the bag. Faster. The allowed speed limit is 25. What's that? The prototype. It's gone. How gone?
Is that a joke?
It gets worse. The meeting with the boss? Well, the location doesn't exist. What? Oh, stop here. Stick with me. Hey! You okay?
Nikki, that's our only prototype.
What's plan B, Nikki? It's okay, I can still pitch without it. I just gotta get to that meeting.
In the place that doesn't exist?
Yeah.
Wait a minute, that's not one of ours.
What's that? Hey, Alice. Give me a hollow room. Get Jen. All booked. You are in suite 305. Take a left. You have a message from the CEO. Hey. Hey, it's Beth. I'm heading up to the 16th floor. See you there. Hey guys. Hey Jen.
Hey, we're coming a bit close.
I think you're gonna want to take a look at this.
Building schematics. Alright, let me do a deep search against everything in public records.
Great. Devin, ideas?
Let me take a closer look. Well, it's definitely a piece of tech. What it does... I'm gonna need a few minutes.
You have 5.
Alright, bingo. Hey, I made a match. It's the Fine Arts Museum, 3 blocks from here.
Any other? Nothing. It doesn't exist. Of course it doesn't. Alright, well, keep at it. Hey, Devin, time's up.
Okay, so there's GPS and an NFC transmitter.
So it's location-based.
It seems that way.
Hey, Jen.
There's a marker on the blueprint, middle of the first floor.
I don't see anything.
Well, whatever it is, it should be right in front of you.
Turn everything back to Rome.
It's nice to finally meet you in person.
This is yours.
What's going on? So this was all just some kind of... Let's think of this as a kind of interview. An unorthodox one, but it does the trick. He should know. I put him through, too.
Hi, Jeremy.
Hey. So I need for presentations today. I'd like to talk to you about a new project I'd like you to handle. Take us right through it.
So that was all about outside of the box thinking. And I thought they was pretty amazing in how you know, is that gonna be 10 years away, 20 years away? The interesting thing about all these videos is the technology all exists. It hasn't come to the market yet, but there's nothing that they advertise in terms of proximity location, holography, augmented reality, the glasses that they're wearing, and the AI assistants. I mean, the technology is off the shelf at this point. It's just a matter of finding its way to market.
In 1999, I went to a presentation by Adobe, and they were talking about how shopping was going to be revolutionized, that you could take the shoes and kind of feel and spin them around in your hands and all these kind of things. And at that point, I thought, there's no bandwidth to be able to do this. You know, these kind of principles are great unless they can't be facilitated. All right.
One of the next features of Cable Labs, because they're the cables in the laboratory, of course, is the next step, and it's in the very near future, actually, moving from 1 gig to 10 gig, and having that deployed within the cable systems across the country.
Right.
And not having to, uproot and disrupt the current network, but to build on DOCSIS 3.1, and it will be DOCSIS 4.0 or whatever, but to provide 10 gig service on the pre-existing network. So, yeah, cable labs is great.
Yeah, it is. And I've talked with all of you. I think that we're really on the path for the broadband issue. We haven't figured out the people issue. How do you wrap your head around this kind of reality, and its people and its communities, and it's the adoption of the technologies is where the challenge is going to be.
An interesting comment. I don't know whether most of you know that I'm involved with the Oxnard Union High School and Santa Paula Unified School District, working with the students' sports broadcasting. Well, we were over at Oxnard High School the other day, right? And they don't allow us to go on their secure network over there. So you get started, and then all of a sudden, when everybody comes in and is using that network, all of a sudden you don't even have enough bandwidth to live stream the game. So the thing about what's happening is the more and more that people are utilizing, we just need that bandwidth, or we're not gonna survive.
I'm waiting for a Moore's Law kind of thing for bandwidth.
Well, no, we've been behind the times.
Yeah.
We just have not.
The applications there's gotta be a Moore's Law. The applications will rise to the level of bandwidth available,
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
And then they won't work until the bandwidth is increased.
You're not gonna get that adoption from this, right? You can show this to all your constituents all day long, and we're like, yeah, that's great. Can I get some clean water?
Yeah.
Right? So if you can, that's why your suggestion is so interesting about the water metering or the metering, because it drives demand, or it makes it easy, right? How do you make it easy for your consumers to actually adopt something? This is hard for us to get our heads around, and we're technology people.
And it goes back to the small victories, low hanging fruit. Let's build to this, but
To be an innovator and be the first one out there is always the tough one, out on the wagon train, being that first car. But the advantages of that are that we're able to try things that nobody else has tried yet. And I think everybody knows what Silicon Valley is. Everybody knows what Silicon Beach is. Why can't we become Silicon County? We don't have that driving force, okay, to say what happened. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. My wife and I, when we got married, couldn't wait to move out of Brooklyn. It was disgusting. You know the hottest place to live right now? Brooklyn, New York. That's what we could be doing out here in the entire county if we had broadband like that.
This is, to me, everybody is aware of what a canary in a coal mine is. I mean, it's sitting there waiting for poisonous gas, and when the canary dies, you gotta get out of the coal mine. To me, this kind of thing is the canary, you know, it's,
Yep.
this is where it's going, and whether, I can't tell you whether it'll be 5 years or 10 years. But, you know, we're gonna have to figure out, when we try to communicate to our electeds about what a smart city looks like and how it works, it needs to blow their minds, because that's the beginning of transformation, I believe. You know, it is that, without a sense of urgency, we won't get any movement.
But to Caesar's point, it has to be relatable.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I think it's gotta matter for what's gonna get them sort of elected or, you know, keep their constituents happy, so water metering, you know, reporting on the quality of the water, telemetry sensors, air quality, you know, stuff that the municipalities can produce, you know, directly to their constituents. While you're building the infrastructure, because the same fiber that's going, you know, that we bought from Spectrum that was, you know, a gig is now 10 gigs, now we're going to 100 gig backbone infrastructure, right? And it's just the electronics that we're just swapping out again.
You guys are making a great point, and it's kind of finishing up my week. I was talking to a city official earlier this week, and he said, broadband, I don't understand the goals. And I said, well, you've got digital literacy, you've got economic development, you've got the fact that you have areas in town that are very low, you know, you've got telemedicine, education, you name it. Yeah, but what are the goals?
But if you reframe it to say citizens supporting, right, so you literally take the narrative of what is the goal and apply it to, we've got 35,000 people who live in this town, this is built the water we need, they like clean water, okay.
Here's how we're gonna do that.
Right.
And then you get a victory. And then you go out and you sell and you promote it to the public and you say, look, if we do this one thing, here's another little victory. Now you're building credibility. Now they're getting, you know, kudos for being the elected officials that can get reelected later. Everybody's benefiting, and now and the infrastructure is getting built. Now, once you have the infrastructure, somebody comes in and says, hey, I'm gonna need this infrastructure to bring my business there. Like, hey, sorry,
You start with an ordinance that promotes sort of your land or anything like that to get the water metering in, that same stuff eventually, right, is gonna operate on a different frequency, and it's gonna be a 10 gig radio. That is going to be able to support a theoretical unlimited amount of devices connected to it in an IoT fashion.
So we're back to Portland. I mean, when I see this is proxy testing. Okay, yeah, it's a cool interview, it's proxy testing. People are terrified that using broadband, you can't prove who you are, because you can be anonymous by having credentials, right? You know, this is the way around that. So you can also say to an elected official, okay, how do I know I'm really talking to them, who I'm talking to?
Greg, what's that analogy about the iceberg?
We're in the iceberg pushing business, and we really need to be in the snowball rolling business. It's a lot easier to accomplish. Keithism.
So, any last comments, going around the table, have anybody's got any updates, anything they wanna share with the group before we adjourn? On the phone?
I have one. This is Joe from the Joan. I attended a presentation on digital inclusion, digital literacy programs, and there was a fascinating document that I'm trying to get a copy of that did an analysis of various digital inclusion curricula and weighted them based on whether it's around job search skills as opposed to Microsoft Office literacy or Google Docs literacy. And it was fascinating. It gave an overall scorecard and evaluated them all in terms of what your drivers are for teaching individuals. And I wanted to see if I can get a copy of that, maybe share it with the team, and then ask, I guess it's Chris of CPUC, if the county collectively with all of the entities were to put together a digital inclusion training plan, might there be additional funds from CPUC to support that literacy effort?
I would have to check. I'm not one of the programmatic. I'm the local government liaison for the area, so I'd be speaking out of turn to give a definite answer on that. I can certainly check for you, yeah.
Yeah, if you could check, because I heard that CPUC, if there are regional digital inclusion programs, might have some additional funding to support that, so, stepping way over the line on behalf of everyone in the room, to the extent that you could find out what those regional programs might support, that would be great.
Joe, I'll send it to you.
Okay.
I'll send it to you, Joe. I'll send you a link.
Thank you.
Okay. Other announcements?
Something about the CETF or the digital inclusion?
Yeah, the CSO programs.
We'll both jump on.
Any other, before we adjourn? Going once, going twice?
Happy Thanksgiving to all.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.